Mabry was a happy, healthy, normally developing baby. And then when she turned 8 months old, she had her first spasm out of nowhere. Monday morning came around and she had another more pronounced spasm. And so that prompted an emergency neurology appointment that week where she had an EEG and was diagnosed with infantile spasms.
We discovered genetics very early on. So our first visit with our neurologist, she recommended the Greenwood Genetics Center. It's something that she has had a lot of good experience with and knew that this was a world-class institution that for a medical emergency like Mabry's was the best place for us to go. And Dr. Skinner was almost instantaneously available to us. I think the very next day from when we were connected, he offered to meet with us, and from introduction to conversation, it was 12 or 18 hours, if that.
We were on a Zoom call with him, and he made room in his schedule for us later that day to come and bring Mabry so that we could kick off our first round of genetic testing at Greenwood Genetics Center. It was the Friday before Memorial Day weekend. Nobody else was here except for him and a couple other people, and he really prioritized helping us get the answers that we needed for Mabry. When Mabry's spasms started, we didn't really understand the significance of them at the time. We were very concerned, and it prompted us to seek medical intervention, but of course we didn't know how serious that would become for her.
And of course, one of the challenges of infantile spasms is it's kind of a canary in the coal mine. It lets you know that there's some sort of underlying neurological damage, but it can pop up for a variety of causes. You don't know if it's something where there's a structural malformation or some sort of genetic disease. It can manifest in a lot of different ways. And so we had to set about immediately to figure out what was causing her spasms so that we could treat them and get those seizures to go into remission.
I have lost count of how many rounds of genetic testing we've gone through. I think 7.
And they're still ongoing.
Right. And so it has been, no stone has been left unturned. We've been really impressed with the care that we've received at Greenwood Genetics Center. Dr. Skinner has emailed us multiple paragraph-long emails explaining a lot of details and intricacies of the genetic testing on, late on Saturday nights or Sunday afternoons. He's just really taken such an interest in Mabry's case, and also in educating us as parents to understand some of the nuances of these really complex genetic conditions that we are exploring for Mabry.
It was particularly valuable for us too as we were heading into surgery, where we needed to get some genetic answers to know if Mabry would be a candidate for surgery. Not every child who has infantile spasms, in her case, her infantile spasms are called by something called vocal cortical dysplasia, which is a malformation in her brain. And so what she ultimately ended up having surgery for was to remove that malformed area of brain. But before we could make that call on if she'd be able to be a surgical candidate, we needed to know what the cause was. And there are certain genetic conditions where if you have it, you're not a candidate for surgery because the surgery does cause certain deficits. And so sometimes those deficits just outweigh the benefits that seizure freedom can provide.
Within 4 days of surgery, her verbal communication, both receptively and expressively, really took off. We could just tell that she was understanding so much more of what we were saying to her, was so much more engaged. We have worked really, really hard in a variety of rehab programs, both inpatient at Cincinnati Children's Hospital and then an outpatient neurospecific rehab program in Boston in December, to rehabilitate a lot of the deficits that were caused by the surgery. And so she is able to walk again. She is working on running again. She's working on climbing. She's a very determined little girl, and so she's made remarkable progress. That would go away. Since surgery, we have just seen her build on all these different skills. She's just saying more and more words, expressing more and more ideas and opinions, and I just feel like we're getting more of Mabry. She keeps a very busy calendar. She has PT 3 times a week, OT 3 times a week, speech 3 times a week, and then early intervention services as well. So she stays busy for sure.
we've just been blessed to work with an incredible team here at Greenwood Genetics. Fran and Ellen, Dr. Skinner, everyone has been accommodating and reached out to us nights, weekends, and the weeks leading up into surgery. Fran would reach out to our surgical team in Cincinnati and make sure that everyone was on the same page about the sampling of Mabry's tissue. Ellen was kind enough, she was out on maternity leave at one point and she was still thinking about Mabry, contacting us.
It gave us immense peace of mind as parents in the waiting room, waiting for our child to come out of surgery, to know that the tissue sampling that was needing to be done was under the guidance of Greenwood Genetics Center, and that all of that was well in hand, and we didn't have to worry to make sure that we got what we needed.
Okay.
Donald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm he had a cow, E-I-E-I-O. A moo-moo here and a moo-moo there, here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo-moo. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I.